Hello and welcome back to this edition of Daily Actives brought to you by Do It Like Macro. I am Dustin. This is the show where we look at the most active stocks in Yahoo Finance for the day. As you'd expect, if you watched my video from yesterday, we're going to be starting with Open. It appears that Open is continuing to get the bid, not necessarily up in that sense, but we're getting a lot of volume. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, hopefully you watched yesterday, I do talk a lot about volume, especially when we're looking at something like Open. What I did comment yesterday, though, is that based on what we're seeing in terms of the past 3 months, and look at the past 6 months, the past 6 months here, we can see is that what I would expect to happen is kind of happening where the top of the range is breaking out in Open. You can see the very top of the range is at 1097, which means we could potentially get up there. It's highly unlikely. And today we closed at 892. Today was a down day. It looks like obviously we do have expected news over the next 24 hours or so based on what is expected to be a rate cut from the Federal Reserve. Obviously, we want to see 50 basis points. 25 basis points is probably going to crush the market, but we'll find out tomorrow, boys and girls, I think around 1 p.m. Eastern. So hold on to your butts, as they say in Jurassic Park. Now, when we're looking at the overall chart, you can see it's essentially based here, super based. But I do think that there's an opportunity for it to get above 10. Now, I don't like necessarily that I'm seeing lower and falling volume. I do like the fact that the volume is happening when the price is going down, not necessarily when it's going up. But what I do want to say is that I do think that we are probably in a place where Open could easily just kind of like sit here for a little bit. I'm not saying that it won't go to the moon, or I think I saw people putting up price targets like 82, 85, whatever dollars. We could get there, but the idea that we're going to go from $8.92 today to $82 anytime in 2025 is probably pretty laughable, unless you get an absolute short squeeze, which then, I mean, all bets are off. You're probably going to blow up some hedge funds then, which good on you. If we're looking at the daily sentiment here, obviously we're well above this 50% line. That's the black line here. Well above 50%. You want to see the green above the line. That means you're getting much more bullish price action versus bearish price action. You can see that on the daily as well as on the 15-day as well. So I do think that Open has what looks to be at least a bright future. I could easily see this thing at $20 or $30 just based on the type of dynamics that I'm seeing. I don't have any valuation, no fundamentals. I'm not doing any like dollar cost averaging or backing into what I think the free cash flow is of this company. I'm looking purely at how this thing is being traded based on price. The one thing that I will say that I don't like is that I don't like that we're still seeing rising volatility. I would prefer to see the volatility start to kind of roll over. I'd like to see the volatility roll over and then we get a negative correlation, because when you get a falling volatility and negative correlation, the price usually goes sideways to up, which is usually pretty positive. And then even when we look at the standard volatility here, we can see the volatility is starting to kind of, it's higher than it should be. Obviously, like this is a ridiculous amount of volatility. If you think that 276% of volatility, that's absolutely insane considering that back here you're at like 90 or 100% vol, which is still really high. But when you're thinking about something that was a penny stock, I wouldn't suspect anything different. Now, when we look at the data here for Open, the one thing I'll call out is that we're still moderately high. Now, even though we were down 6 and 6 basis points today, essentially we're still pretty high. Obviously, the trade level is around 581, so I could expect us to come back down to 6. I do suspect that that trade level is going to be up around 6 tomorrow or a little bit higher. The top of the range, just like I was mentioning, we're getting a higher high. It's at $10.97. That is a good sign, but I do not like necessarily the type of moves that I'm seeing right now, because I do think this probably just needs to base. I mean, it really needs to set like a proper base at a real price, because we're up 135% in 1 month. Now, obviously, we were up a few days ago 337%, 334% in a month. So I would expect that we're going to see things like this from Open. Now, let's look at Big Bear. Big Bear was an interesting one today because I'm assuming just based on the name that it says BigBear.ai Holdings that this is an AI name. I love seeing things like this just purely because when I think about thematics of the market itself, AI is really hot. It's getting the bid, it's getting the attention, it's getting articles written about it. So if we look at this, what we can see is that essentially we saw a massive run up here in May, a huge run up in June and July, kind of hit a top there and then did a pullback. If you're looking at just this daily range here, you can see the green is when it's bullish, the red is when it's bearish. Obviously, it looks like it went bearish essentially here on the 12th of August. It's essentially been bearish ever since. But the one thing that I do like is that now we're hitting the very top of the range. You're probably going to see a reversal in terms of the bullishness or the bearishness to bullishness pretty soon here. And that candle that we saw today, up 11.24%, that is a very nice day. See, what the difference is here is I think is this is probably, I don't know if this is open to close or this is close to close the way they calculate it. I believe I do it from the previous close to this open or to this close. So I see it up 11.24% today, where I can see that when it's looking at it on Yahoo Finance, you're looking at it at 16.7, whatever. They're doing their thing. That might have been after hours too. The thing that I really love, to be honest, is the volume that we saw today. 207 million shares. You're twice the average of this past 6 months at 97 million shares traded. Big fan of what I'm seeing here in Big Bear AI. And when I'm looking at the sentiment now, as I continue to roll down, the sentiment to me is probably the best indicator that we've got very good upside. The reason why is because just a few days ago, this thing was at 31% bullishness, right? 31%. With this indicator, generally it will get the lowest it'll go will be the high 30s. But when you're dealing with something that's, not necessarily a penny stock, but under $10 and has a lot of momentum behind it and a lot of attention to it, especially when you're getting volume like this, you can definitely see it get down to 31%. But that is when you're going to see a snapback. You're going to see a reversal once you get down to that kind of bearishness, because you just can't get to 100% bearishness. Like nothing goes, I mean, I guess unless you saw the markets in 2020 when oil went negative, for the day. But when I start to think about what we're seeing here in Big Bear, I do not suspect that this is going to be anything other than what is going to be probably like a rocket, especially if I'm looking at the 15-day. We were at 27% bearish, 27% bullish, excuse me, on the 9th. Now we're all the way up to 45%. That is a really good return. As I mentioned before, I like to see when the volatility starts to fall. I think when volatility is falling is when trend revealed itself. You've got volatility falling, you've got price correlation is negative. So as I would suspect, you're going to see the price go sideways to up just based on the derivatives of the price. We're looking at the standard volatility, even though the volatility had a spike today to 69%, 69, 69. If we are looking at this, the volatility has essentially been falling in standard terms, which I really like as well. And then you can see the correlation to the standard volatility was 100% today, which means that obviously the spike that we saw today was an upward spike. Now, if we're looking at the data table, let's just call it what I like here. So first, the only thing I don't really care for the fact that this is significantly high in its range, which means it is well above its normal distribution range. I do love that we saw extremely high volume on a reversal today, especially on 16.7% up. It is still bearish, as you'd expect based on the sentiment that we've seen, but we are well above now the trade level. So that is one of the first indications that I would be looking at that this thing is going to reverse from bearish to bullish, is that we break above the trade level. So right now, I would start to suspect that we're going to see tomorrow. I don't know exactly when it's going to turn bear or bullish. It takes usually a couple days for this to kind of run through, just because it's one of the way that I built the model is that I don't want it to be completely reactive to 1 day movement. I want it to be a couple of days before it starts to make an actual transition. But I suspect that the top of the range is easily going to be above $6 tomorrow. What I suspect as well is that this range, while it got nice and it started to get like kind of like narrow, it's going to expand again, very similar to what it did back here in June. You can see essentially where it got really narrow here in April, May, and June, and then you had that big explosion in the very beginning of June. That explosion is a really good indication of generally good things to come, unless you're seeing the price go down. If the price is like exploding down, that would be really, really bad. But I'm thinking that Big Bear AI has got some legs here potentially. It might be one of those things that at least I'd be paying attention to, especially if we get a nice pullback into like the mid fives, like 550, 560, somewhere in there. If we start to see a down day based on what I'm seeing, especially with the 1 day all the way to the 1 year being this positive, these are really good signals for Big Bear. Now let's go ahead and look at Snap. Snap, the darling of social media, that just generally continues to be an underperformer. But when we're looking at what we see here, especially in this move, what I'm loving, if you just were watching the Big Bear part, what I'm loving is that I see that we saw a big move. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, where you don't want to see the range get narrow and then you see a drop, then the range expands. But now what I'm seeing is that we kind of based. If you watched my video yesterday, I was definitely calling out that I think that Snap is going to be one of those ones that is probably going to fill this gap, probably very consistently, especially when we get down to the volatility section. We've got 2 confirmed days in a row of bullishness returning after bearishness for quite a while there. It looks like we were bearish for at least a little over a month, from it looks like the very beginning of August to what looks like the second week here of September. So Snap looks like it's got some nice runway going forward. It's definitely something I'm going to be paying attention to, because Snap has been one of those ones that if you can trade the range, you can make money on it. It doesn't trend. It generally just is kind of like a range bound trade, because it doesn't grow its active users. It's not making a ton of money. I don't think they're actually necessarily like a big company. I think they just purely exist so Mark Zuckerberg can say that he has a competitor when he doesn't really have one. And if I'm looking at what the price movement has done over the past 2 days, I love that we've seen big volume, like massive volume. The volume, as you're starting to see a reintroduction of bullish momentum inside of the stock, is a really good indication, especially when you had 147 million shares today, 141 million yesterday, and you see that today was up, it looks like 3.7%. If we're looking at the sentiment, we are just breaking back up above that 50% on the daily sentiment, which is exactly what you'd expect considering where the price has been kind of just like sitting down here for a while. We are starting to see some bullish resumption in the sentiment, which I really like to see. We're only at 54%. Again, this thing could go all the way up to 60, 65, depending on how aggressive things get in the market. If we're looking at the overall volatility, as I mentioned, I do like to see when trend, I think trend reveals itself when you have falling volatility. Again, we've got falling volatility and negative correlation, which means that right now we're going to see the price go sideways to up. Regular volatility, pretty low, as you'd expect, because it's been in pretty much a tight range. Now, if we're looking at the overall data, what you can see here is that it's essentially extremely high, which means it's 3 standard deviations above its mean. The volume has been significantly high, is the way I would describe it based off of the range here. We have been bullish for 2 days in a row. I do like to see 2 days of bullish confirming, very similar to what I showed you just earlier in Big Bear in terms of how we were seeing the bearishness and then the price was above. You can see that that was an indication here in Snap is when the price started to get above the trade level, even though it's bearish, that was an indication of bullishness to come. And then if we start to look, I love that I see a price to rise as well. And then we are positive on the 1 day, 5 day, 15 day, and 1 month. The 3 month, we are just about to crack above. I don't think it'll take very much there, especially considering the type of price movement that we've seen. Let's go ahead and look at Nio. Nio is one of those stocks that people have loved for a long time. So Nio Incorporated, I believe that this is one of those EV stocks. I am a big fan of watching these kinds of stocks move because you do get a lot of movement. Now, if we're looking at the 9 month chart, the entire time it's taken to make a baby, this price has pretty much done nothing until if we're really looking at it when we started to get to the end of August. That's when we started to break above this 5 level. 507 was the time you broke above, and now we are at 702. So I'm liking what I'm seeing here in Neo. I think that this is going to be a good stock to probably ride to the end of the year, just based on the type of movement that we're seeing. Not saying you're not going to see major pullbacks. I mean, you see big moves and then sideways action, big moves and then pullbacks, and then big moves. But the big moves do continue for at least it looks like a few days here, if not a week or more. So I'm very convinced in what I'm seeing here in Neo. And again, you're seeing this on massive volume. You saw big volume on the way up. You've seen big volume at the bottoms. You've seen big volume just today. Not as big as you've seen the past few weeks, but you are well above that average of what looks like 60 or 57 million shares being traded over the past 9 months each day. Now, if we're looking at the sentiment, as you'd expect, when the price started to come out of this around July 2nd, you started to see the actual sentiment start to get get bullish again, and we've been riding above that 50% level ever since. I like on the 15 day, we're really right around that 50% level, which I think is really good. And if we're looking at volatility, as I kind of continue to mention, the volatility looks like it's about to crest and start to roll over. But right now, the volatility, it looks like is pretty high, and we've got a high correlation, which means that right now we're going to see very aggressive price increases. So high volatility, as it's already saying here, suggests price increases, especially when the correlation is positive like that. It's over 60%. We're looking at the regular volatility. You can see that it's been riding up ever since the very beginning of July. That just generally tells me we're going to see a reversal. Now, if we're looking at the data, here, the thing that I like is that essentially for the past week or so, maybe longer, we've essentially been watching Neo be in the middle of its range. So from the 4th all the way until the 15th, it was in the very middle of its range, which the range obviously moves and is dynamic based off of the data that I get every single night. Right now we are moderately high, so I would suspect that we could very easily see the top of the range sometime soon. I would suspect that the top of the range is going to continue to move higher and higher. Now, it hasn't been moving aggressively high. It has been coming down, it looks like, just recently. But it looks like this 733 for the top of the range was probably the bottom, and now it looks like we're going to start moving higher as well. So I do like what I'm seeing. We've got price to rise in the future price path. We're positives on the 1 day all the way to the 1 year. I like what I see here in Neo. I think Neo is going to be a great setup, at least going forward for the next few weeks. Let's go ahead and look at NVIDIA. Full disclosure, this is one that I actually bought today because even though this thing is currently bearish, I'm not sure that I'm convinced that it's going to be bearish. But at the same time, I have to start looking at my own data and start to really think like, okay, NVIDIA has been bearish. It looks like ever since the middle of August on the 19th is when we went bearish. We essentially haven't had a resumption of bullishness at all. The price has essentially been going sideways to down. We need to break that 185 or 190. I'd love to see this thing over 200, obviously, because now that I've got some calls on it. But if we look, the one concerning thing is that I'm seeing, actually, I wouldn't say it's concerning. I would say that this is a mixed signal, is that while the price has been falling, the volume has been falling. And the reason why I say it's a mixed signal is because when price is falling, if you truly believe that it's bullish, you would want to see the volume falling as well. That means you're getting a pitter patter out of selling, and the sellers are almost dried up, especially considering that we are down at like 124 million shares traded on September 11th, 146 million, and then 138 million. When you can see the average here is 233 million shares have been traded over the past 9 months on a daily basis in NVIDIA. So I kind of like what I'm seeing. We're looking at the sentiment. The positive thing that I'd say, and this might be hopium that I've given myself, but I am looking at essentially we are not that negative. Like, yes, we've had like this move down on the 5th where we got down to 40% bullishness, and we are currently down at what looks like 43% bullishness. But I still suspect that we're going to get some moves higher in NVIDIA. This, again, may just be a bunch of hopium. So take this with a grain of salt since I have a position, and I definitely would like to see this thing go higher. If we're looking at the overall volatility here, I do like that it's starting to roll over. Like the correlation is slightly positive and can start to go negative very easily. Because again, as I keep saying, when volatility is falling and correlation is negative, the price will go sideways to up, which I do like to see. Now, to give you a reason why I bought this today, it's very similar to if you watched the piece in this video from Big Bear as well as Snap. The price is in the middle of its range, right? It's in its normal distribution range, which means it's right in the middle. So I don't have a ton of downside, as well as yesterday when I was looking at it, this thing was above its trading level and it was still bearish. So I was like, okay, if we get another down day, which we did today at down 1.6%, I was like, okay, I can buy options here probably at 180 call options, and I can see the top of the range is 185. The one thing I did not expect is that the range was going to start coming down. I was not expecting it to have a lower high. That is not very positive, and we did not even hold the trade level today, so that's really not positive. Being down 1.6%, I do suspect that this is going to probably get a bid just based on it being a really large component of the Qs, and I'm suspecting that when we get this rate cut tomorrow, we're going to see the market, if we get 50 basis points, the market should at least, if it doesn't handle it well tomorrow, it should at least be good enough to have handled this by the middle of next week. So I'm looking at towards the end of the month, probably like the 25th, 27th, 30th is where I would suspect that NVIDIA is going to start to resume its bullishness. So I feel very comfortable with my call options right now, but we will continue to monitor that because I took a pretty decent sized position because I'm suspecting that NVIDIA is going to resume its bullishness, even though it's been bearish for the moment. Let's go ahead and look at Mara. So Mara, if you, what is this? Sorry, I had a moment there. So you can see with Mara, what I like about Mara, let's just be honest. I did a video on it yesterday, so it's definitely in there. I'm pretty sure I said that Mara was one of those things that I'd be paying attention to as well, because if we look at the pattern that we've seen since the middle of July all the way through the beginning of August and then into September, it essentially is a very similar pattern to what we've seen already, I believe, in Nio and in Snap, where you saw a big move, you saw like a basing pattern, you saw some bearishness come in, and now it's starting to break out above the top of its range. If I do the 1 month here, you can start to see it a little bit more closely. The price is above the top of its range. We're starting to get some range expansion there, which I'm really enjoying because I think range expansion is a great indicator of when good things are going to come in one direction or another. If you saw the portion on Snap, it had a big down move. We have range expansion, and then it continued for a while. I like when I see that the range gets kind of tight like that. And I do love that the move that we've seen today was on really big volume. There's 111 million shares traded. It looks like the 6 month volume has been 46 million shares traded per day. As we start to get to this level, we're starting to see a really big resumption in the volume here in Mara. So I am a big positive. I do see that as a big positive. Now we're looking at the sentiment. Sentiment is giving us an interesting signal because we still are at 50% here on the daily, but on the 15-day, we're already at 58%, which means that we've had some very bullish moves over the past 15 days, especially towards the recent couple days. And it looks like we're probably going to get that to resume into the daily as well, because the 15-day is going to be a leading indicator of when you're looking at the daily movement. Again, as I've been mentioning earlier in terms of volatility, I love when the volatility is falling. And I love when you're about to get a reset in the volatility as you got here, because this is probably the lowest it's going to go when you're getting down to zero point 0.3, essentially 300 basis points. It's not 300, but you know what I mean, like 0.300. So if we're looking at it from this perspective, I'm expecting the volatility to reset. And what I would assume is that we're probably going to get a blow off, not a blow off, but probably like a gap, because the volatility is resetting inside of Mara. So I would suspect that you're going to get a gap probably in the next like 5 days here inside of Mara. This is just the way that I'm viewing it from the perspective that I have. I probably would end up buying Mara, I guess. And what I love is that we're incredibly negative on the correlation, which means we can really only get more positive. And then when you start to get the correlation start to go positive as the volatility starts to break out, that's when you can get those gap higher. So now we're looking at the overall data. As I would suspect, based on what I'm seeing, you see this thing is extremely high today. You're at 1753, which is well above the top of the range, as we already highlighted when we looked at the chart at the higher part. We are currently bullish. We are well above the trade level. We saw a humongous spike in volume, as I already called out. That is extremely high volume at 111 million shares. It's probably been a long time since I've had 100 million shares traded in Mara. a long time, probably going back all the way to the middle of July here. So when we're looking, we can see even on the 1 day, 5 day, 15 day, all the way across the 1 year, we're positive. We've got a future price path, price to rise. I like what I'm seeing, so I'm very positive necessarily on what I'm seeing in Mara. Let's go ahead and look at Grab. I wish I'd have bought this today, actually. Grab is one that I definitely highlighted in yesterday's video. The reason why is because I'm a big fan of Grab. If you've ever traveled around the world, it's like Uber for in Asia, essentially, where you can get like a motor cart, you can get a bunch of different things. Big fan of what I'm seeing in Grab. There we go. What I noticed is that I spelled Grab wrong. I spelled it Garb. You probably saw that in the video and we're like, you spelled that wrong, buddy. So when we're looking at Grab here, it's going to give me new data really quick. So what I can see here on Grab, very similar to what we've seen already in Nio as well as Snap to a certain extent. I'm going to go ahead and look at the 9 month. You see that you're getting some movement, you're getting a little bit of drop, a little bit of basing, and then you're starting to get a breakout. The thing that I really like about it, and I continue to say this because I think this is a really good signal, at least on the way that I like to look at markets, is from a swing trading perspective, is when you get a very tight range like you've had here, essentially from June, July, and August, then you get an expansion of volatility, you get the price riding above the top of the range, and you're starting to see aggressive bullishness with aggressive volume. This volume here at 85 million, 100 million, 108 million, 110 million shares traded on each day, that is a great indication that there's been a complete transformation in the volatility regime as well as the momentum and the sentiment in the individual stock. This is just how I see things, not financial advice, but this is just how I see things. So when I'm looking at the daily sentiment now, I can tell we're well above the 50%. We're hovering at 53%, but we've been as high as 56% just a few days ago. Even on the 15-day, we're seeing it. And very similar to what I called out in Mara in terms of how volatility resets, you can see back here on the 7th, volatility was resetting. It looks like at 0.374. Volatility correlation was negative and now is going positive while the volatility is here. That is how you get explosive moves. That is how you get a move where you're up. That is how you get a move like this. Like that's how you're up 2.93%. You continue to be above the top of the range. It's at 632. The top of the range is at 628. Let me just get that for a second. So the price is at 632. The top of the range is at 628. We're still significantly high. We're not extremely high. I would like to see this pull back a little bit personally. Today would have been a day because it did start out the day negative. So it would have potentially been a day to buy if you bought it earlier in the morning before it was up nearly 3%. We're very bullish. We see the trade levels at 525 continues to rise. We've got higher highs in the range. Love to see it. Future price path is priced to rise. We're positive from the 1 day to the 1 year. I like what I'm seeing in Grab. I think Grab is a great example of something that you want to be looking at. It's something that I'll definitely be paying attention to. Let's go ahead and look at Tesla now. So now we've got the data for Tesla. If we're looking at Tesla, Tesla is showing very similar moves to what we've seen in Snap, Nio, Mara, Grab. You can see we've got a very tight range that's essentially been going on most of the year. The thing is now above the top of its range. I'm going to go ahead and look at the 6 month. The price is now above the top of the range, continues to ride. You can see we're getting this on very good volume. Now Tesla has very high volume, but to see 167 million, 163 million, well above that 108 million, very, very positive. We're looking at the sentiment. It's very clear here that obviously we're above the 50%. We've essentially been above the 50% since May, even though the price wasn't really going anywhere. We were very, very bullish, which you'd expect in Tesla because this thing has probably been blessed by the volatility gods, as I like to say. On the 15-day, we're at 65% bullishness. You can see the volatility, while it has been kind of essentially middling around or muddling around, it's starting to break out. The correlation is not necessarily positive to the breaking out volatility just yet, but it is getting higher. Like here, you had a negative correlation of negative 1.61, 0.422, and then 0.40. So it is getting more incrementally correlated to the volatility, which you like to see, and is something you'd expect inside of Tesla. Obviously, if we're looking at the data table here, Tesla is, again, blessed by the volatility god, so it very easily can be above and significantly high in its range. It had pretty regular volume today at 110 million. It is bullish. It is well above the top of its trade, or well above its trade level. The top of the range is at 418, so I'll suspect to see that much higher, considering that yesterday was at 401 and now it's at 418. Price to rise is what I see in the future price path, and we're positive on all of the look back rolling returns. I like what I'm seeing inside of Tesla as well, but this is just essentially how I see the market. If you've made it this far in the video and you're interested, you can go ahead and give me a follow on Twitter, Bootleg Macro. If you're interested in getting some crypto insights, I do have a crypto newsletter. It comes out every single, the free version comes out every single, let me just go ahead and look. The free version comes out every single Saturday at 11 a.m. The premium version, it's literally $10 a month. Comes out at 6:15 every morning. What you end up getting is you get an email just like this. You'll get one Going to have it's going to have the major cryptocurrencies: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Ripple, Doge, all that kind of stuff. You're going to have the exact same thing that we were just looking at in terms of like a price and volume guide. You're going to get the price, you're going to get the volume, going to add the zeros on Bitcoin, you're going to see the sentiment, you're going to get a 1 day, 5 day, and 1 month. You get the trade level, the buy zone, the sell zone, all that kind of stuff. I think it's a really nice thing that I personally use to be able to manage my crypto because it's a 24-hour actual market and I don't have enough time to pay attention to it all the time. So I can look just very easily at this. I've got it updated so that it gives me some individual commentary just on what's been going on in the market, and I found it to be really, really nice. I do get myself sent one every single evening as well, but if you're looking, you'll end up getting the ones at 6:15 in the morning East Coast time. So if you're on the West Coast, it'll come out really early at like 3. So if you wake up anytime to trade markets, you'll already have this before you can start making some decisions. Tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm very curious in your thoughts. Are you going to buy Snap? Do you like Nio? Are you a big NVIDIA fan? What's about Mara? How does Grab have your attention? Are you a Tesla fanboy? Anything that you're thinking, just let me know in the comments below. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.